That's the music of Igor Stravinsky, and he was not available for this podcast. The trombonist and arranger Mike Fahie is here to talk about his great new recording, Urban Urbane. He's arranged all kinds of great pieces for his tight jazz orchestra, so we'll listen. And this is Dave Douglas for the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. Thanks for listening. We'll also be hearing some Ellington, Bach, Puccini, and talk to Mike about arranging, composing, and band leading. We had this conversation right around the time of the Democratic National Convention, an impressive show of unity through diversity and of what empathetic leadership will look like. We need it. And every speaker drove home the importance and the dire urgency of voting. It's as simple as going to vote.gov to register and get all the information you need. Please do so. This is not an election where apathy has any place. People are getting hurt. It's time to make this change so that we can move on to all the other changes we are going to have to work on. And don't forget down ballot. Senate, House, state, and local elections have as much, if not more, impact than the big one. Stay in it. And thanks for listening. I hope you will join Greenleaf Music as a subscriber and get all of our music at our Bandcamp page. And I hope you enjoy this beautiful music arranged by Mike Fahie. Wow, we were listening to that arrangement of Firebird Suite from Igor Stravinsky, and now we get to talk to the gentleman who arranged it and played trombone on it. Welcome, Mike Fahie.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here with you.
I'm happy to talk to you. Am I pronouncing your name right? It's like an Irish thing.
It is an Irish thing. One syllable, Fahie, sometimes with a little diphthong at the end, a little Fahie.
Ah,
But that H is generally silent.
okay, good to know. Thanks. Um, I wanted to ask first about, arranging a piece like that. It's such a iconic piece of music, as are all of the pieces that you arranged on this new album,
They
Urban
are.
Arcane. So where do you start? I mean, I don't want to sound cliched or anything, but the arrangement is really colorful. You're working for a very specific instrumentation, jazz orchestra. So what's
Yes.
the first thing that you think about when you begin an arrangement like this?
Well, interestingly, each arrangement actually kind of had a different plan or a little different goal, because I didn't want them all to be the same kind of thing. And this one in particular, I had decided on doing the Firebirds. It was one of my later ones, so this was sort of adding to this group of arrangements that I had. And I said, I want this one to really be sort of like, what do you call it, program music, to have a story. And of course, Firebird already has a story.
Hmm.
It is a ballet, but I was just I was seeing the Firebird more like a phoenix or a dragon, and so that was really the starting point. It wasn't so much, I was starting. I mean, of course, the melodies and the harmonies and the counterpoint is all in there, but I was actually starting this particular one with the concept of this story and what do I want this dragon to do? What do I want to happen? And what are the different elements of the music that are going to reflect the story of this dragon?
Huh. So it's actually, when you sit down, you're not thinking about the instruments and about the notes. And I mean, at least initially, of course, later on, but your first thought is, how do I tell the story and what sorts of sounds am I going to use to
That's
get it?
definitely for this one particularly. That's definitely what I was going after. I mean, for instance, without jumping too much, but for instance, the Chopin, I knew that it was about these chords, right?
Mm.
Just the way that these chords like sort of majestically lead one to another, and how can I use these chords and basically write an entire new piece on. So that was a whole different starting point. But this one was definitely big picture first.
Hmm. That's interesting. Um, do you ever feel like when you do this and you make an arrangement, it ends up being an original composition? I know
Well,
Gil Evans talked about that a lot, how he was not a composer explicitly, that
oh,
he was an
interesting.
arranger.
An arranger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, the Chopin, there's only, I mean, anyone can use those 12 chords, right? Those 12 bars of chords. I mean, there's a lot of songs that are written on pre-existing chords.
Yeah.
So that definitely feels like that's a whole new piece, basically. And certainly there's a lot of elements in this Firebird as well that are that are new and mine, and basically, but I take Stravinsky's original melodies and I develop them just in a different way.
Right. And he didn't have saxophone solos either.
He did not. He did not, and he didn't. Well, actually, I guess I was about to say he
Piano
didn't use
solo.
all these augmented sounds, but yeah, he probably did. He just didn't use them there.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting uh, thing to arrange it to, because it's early Stravinsky, like his
Hmm.
music progressed so much in his life.
Radically.
Later
Yeah.
on, might have been interesting to see what would happen if you took one of the later pieces and
Right. It's interesting because I mean, also did one of Bartok, which is also early Bartok. So it's still, both of these are still in the tonal range. And it's funny because I like playing chromatic and quasi-tonal music as an improviser, and I haven't quite gotten all the way there as an arranger yet. Although there's elements of quasi or multi-tonality in a lot of this stuff. I haven't. I've yet to take. That's probably a next step, is to find a piece that I find really compelling, that's really not tonal at all,
Hmm.
and make. I guess I have a hard time figuring out what am I going to do to keep the integrity of a piece like that, but still change it. right? Where it's a little more maybe obvious with how do you say, with harmony or melody that definitely has a definite direction to, then I can keep it with that direction, but just change how I get there. But
Right.
it's harder with atonal music.
Yeah, and so much of what you're doing with the arranging is translating it to this very different kind of ensemble,
Right, with the colors and
as
everything.
orchestra, and so yeah, how would you get at an atonal piece? But you mentioned that you like playing in that context as a trombone player. I wonder how much you think about what your own playing is going to have to live up to when you write the arrangements.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
I don't play on absolutely everything I write. It's kind of it actually ends up being about 50-50 that I'm playing on. But I definitely, of course, if there's sections that I'm going to be improvising on, I just want them to be compelling settings for me to make a statement, basically.
Wow. Yeah. Well, but your voice is really distinctive within the sound of the record. I think it's one of the things
Wow.
that I really like about it.
I love that.
Few
That's the goal.
voices within the ensemble that you write. Chet Doxas is in there, and I've played with him a lot, but I really recognize the sound, and it's really it makes a deeper experience. Let's say.
Absolutely. And it's why, I mean, it's great having a band that you've had for a while, and you can really write for individual people. And I like that style of jazz orchestra writing anyway, where there's a lot of space for individual melodic lines. I feel like I actually do a lot of my career is playing in jazz orchestras in large ensembles, and I feel like why maybe I've had a certain amount of success in that is that I try and play the parts as personally as I can. And I want to write music that asks that. Now, of course, like anything, there's times that you're playing more supporting role. Naturally, there's there's pads of music. There's things that are all supposed to be very sort of ensemble, sound like one thickened sound. But there's also hopefully many spots to shape a line throughout this record.
Interesting. I was just thinking while you were talking about that, how there's this thing among a lot of classical composers who came up as violists.
Yes.
And there's the same, I think, for a lot of jazz composers who came up as trombonists. It was my first instrument.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I wised up and switched to trumpet when I was the ripe old
Smart
age
man.
of 9. But no, I think I've always thought that was I don't know if it's a trope, but
It sure is. And I mean, I don't have
you
total.
Well,
Yeah.
you're not playing in the middle of the music.
I agree. That's 100% it. It's that when you're playing your parts, if you're paying attention, you're already aware of how the stuff works together. Right? Because in the trombone section, especially if you're playing first trombone, right? So when you're playing the melody with the trumpet, you hopefully you're paying attention to your whole section, so you get where the bass line goes with the bass trombone. You see when you're in the middle of the music with the saxophones, and then when you have a lead line of your own. I mean, you get a chance to do a little bit of everything from that chair. And like I say, if you're paying attention, you can learn a ton about the music, even without needing to study the score every time. Hopefully you're catching it right away. So by osmosis, you pick up a lot of stuff.
Sitting in the middle.
Yes.
Of everything, both in terms of the range, the tessitura, but also where you sit in the band.
Exactly. Right in the middle of the band, too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Really interesting. I just one more question, and I want to play a very different arrangement, but I've done some of this too in my recording career, taking classical pieces that quote unquote wouldn't belong in a jazz context and bringing something of our own to them and bringing something of that to our thing. And I just wonder, and I've had various different reactions, but I know you do a lot of writing that's independent of this concept. And so this record is a big statement in that specific direction for you, as opposed to some other things that you might write. So I guess it's a very general question. What is it that made you want to do this? What are your reasons?
Oh, that's
Hey.
great. I'm glad that that's where that statement went
Oh,
because no, it's just it could have gone a lot of different ways, but that one is easy to answer. That one's easy to answer because
wait, did you
I
think I was going to say, how dare you?
no, I didn't think that. I didn't know what I was going to have to answer because the statement's very broad. Big questions about what is jazz and all this stuff. But this is it's easy to answer why I did it because I was starting this project. I was at a point where it was like, okay, it's time to start a new project, right? What's the next thing for me? And I remember spending a lot of time in school and after school and just trying to figure out like, well, how do you create an artistic voice? How do you do that? And of course the answer usually ends up being just, well, be yourself. And of course that's not always so easy to identify what that is. And it was funny because when I was at Manhattan School and I first moved to New York, it seemed to me that there was like excuse me, when I first moved to New York at Manhattan School, it seemed to me that there was a real push and a real drive to incorporate a lot of the Americana into jazz and this feeling of like, Brian Blade's band was out there and it had a real feeling of, I guess I don't know a better word from that. And of course, Kurt Rosenwinkel. So these guitar sounds, these lush sounds that kind of matched some of the music that people were listening to maybe in their childhood or whatever, more modern sounds. And I tried to write some stuff like that and it had whatever success it did. And I realized that wasn't really exactly me. I was just doing what everyone else was doing. And I realized that what makes me not different from everyone, but different from that is that I grew up in a household with classical music all the time. The radio was always on with classical music. I grew up playing classical piano, all that stuff. And I realized, well, this music already has a resonance for me. I don't have to go look for this other music. This music resonates with me. And what can I do to, I could just play it, but I had already been developing this jazz orchestra voice. I say, well, here's an idea. Let's take these songs that mean something to me already and see how I can make them mean more to me personally.
Oh, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. You did a Bach cantata.
I did.
I'm going to butcher the title of it, but I just want to play a little bit more of this. But this is from the cantata Ich hatte viel Bekümmernis.
That's pretty good. And it's called Seufzer, Tränen, Kummer, Not.
Mike Fahie arrangement of Bach from a cantata. It's really beautiful. I have a whole long musical love, passion, interest in singing chorales, and I've been teaching them as a guide to ear training.
I love that. I do the same. One day I'm going to come over and we're going to sing some chorales together.
We'll sing some chorales, hopefully not on a Zoom session.
Exactly.
But the lessons of Bach, the voice leading, I'm sure that must have been a great pleasure to delve into on this.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the pieces with the most counterpoint that I've arranged, and I've always I knew I wanted to do Bach, and again, this one wasn't one of my first ones, because just the same way that arranging atonal music can be challenging, because how do you change it without changing all of it, right? I feel a little bit the same way about counterpoint, right? How do you how do you keep the nature of the piece when the nature of the piece is not just the melody and chords, like you might say of a more typical classical piece, but it's actually the way that each line interacts with each other. That's much more hard to actually change and maintain some sort of semblance of the original. This one really only has, I guess you'd say, 3 lines. It's got the 2 solo lines, which are the soprano and the oboe, and then of course you've got the continuo, and so you'd probably call the bass line a third one of those. So there's less than some of them in terms of how much you have to cover. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, what I mostly did for the arrangement was I kept those 2 lines intact and just thickened them up. I just voiced them,
right,
and
right.
and then I colored it exactly. And then as we extended the arrangement, I composed more music.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, and but again, you're only taking credit as an arranger here.
Yes,
Bach is still the composer.
He is definitely the composer of this. I mean, I definitely did not compose. I know. Also, Michael Abeni always talks about that. You know, when because he's obviously an arranger and a composer, and talks about, well, there's in any arrangement there's originally composed material, right?
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean if your bass, if the melody of the song that you're singing is another song, well, then it's an arrangement, even if you've added your own composed material. So, but all of these, that's why I like the word arranging. I arranged them, but I often refer to them as reimaginings because there's such a large amount of added material.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. This thing about Bach and the cantatas, chorales. Another thing I've found is that the working with the voice leading, working with the way those contrapuntal lines work against each other and the way resolutions happen within the harmony just from melodic movement is really what, for lack of a better word, jazz improvising is. Improvising over a set of chord symbols. Yeah,
that's really what it is. I mean, that's why not only do I study the chorales with some students, but actually the cello suites are amazing because they're unaccompanied lines that also imply all of that resolution and harmony that we're talking about. And when I'm teaching beginner improvising, not beginner, but say mid-level beginner improvising, I talk about voice leading. Excuse me. I talk about voice leading all the time, and just making one note go to the next note, go to the next note is. It's funny. It can be elusive to younger players, and yet it really is when you're, like you said, when you're improvising over a set of chords. That's really what we're doing is creating voice leading.
Yeah, and how it was something that Horace Silver used to say to us. It's not what you play over one chord; it's how you get from one chord to the other. That's hip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hipness being the pinnacle of
the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny because I had a classical trumpet teacher way back when I was, I think 18 years old. I took some lessons with this classical trumpet player as I was sort of developing all my aspects of my trombone playing. And he said his definition of technique was being able to get from one note to the next. Now, that's not exactly the same as chord to the next, but it's the same idea. It's not like being able to play fast or high. It's being able to always connect from one note to the next.
And do you feel like, you mentioned the cello suites. I've been in quarantine working on the violin sonatas and partitas.
The partitas, yeah.
And I play them. We've been locked down for enough time now where I'm getting somewhere. But the funny thing about it is that I'm trying to, I have some of them memorized now, and I try to approach them as an improviser. So, take the material and then go away and come back. And I'm finding it's really difficult because what he wrote is so brilliant.
And compelling.
The minute you step away, you just like, oh
Well, it's so hard to be as organized as that as as a player. I wonder, it's funny, I've practiced the cello suites a lot, and I can't say that I've done a lot of what you're talking about, but it seems to me you might almost have to, at first, sketch out a series of chord changes that you're going to stay with, and that might help you stay as organized as he is. Because like if you just if you kind of just go free and you're not thinking of any chord changes, I mean, both of us, we have enough experience that we're going to still play voice leading, but his is so precise and
directed
and directed.
You always feel like he made the best choice.
Right. Now, of course, maybe we're not going to be that good, but I wonder. I'm just thinking about it myself. That might be the way to go.
Well, the thing
although
for me,
it's a nice, go ahead.
Well, the thing for me is that because we play wind instruments, and these lines, there's no breath in them.
No breath.
So you're forced to improvise to find a place to breathe. And so that's already a decision. So
right.
I'm using the exigency of having to breathe to stay alive to force me into places of my own decision making.
That's great. I love it. It's interesting. Over this thing, I've actually been spending quite a bit of time, which is not the same, but I think it might have some link. Just getting into a state where I play a phrase, maybe 2 notes or 3 notes, and I really just ask myself what needs to be played next. What's the most important thing to be played next? And it's interesting. I find this interesting of myself, that a lot of times if I play like a 3 or 4 note phrase that is diatonic, that has a diatonic feel to it, I end up, my immediate answer over the whole course of things ends up sounding like a standard, ends up sounding like a songbook. I'll repeat the phrase, or I'll edit it a little bit, and when I'm just asking what's the most natural thing to come next, I guess because I've listened to so many standards, I end up just basically improvising a standard. But if I start with a more angular or chromatic phrase, I'll end up with a much more obviously angular chromatic improvisation. I wonder to myself, and I want to go try it now. I want to try, what if I actually start with an entire phrase or 2 of one of the cello suites? What's the music going to demand next? It's going to demand just what Bach wrote, but
I'm seeing the next record.
Yeah. That's cool.
Just, this whole idea of arranging composers, it's an interesting topic, but it's also like not particularly new. And I think a lot of people don't think about all the great, John Kirby and Fletcher Henderson and
absolutely.
And so I'm just going to play a short bit of Duke Ellington's arrangement of Tchaikovsky. I
love it.
Put in
little counter lines and the way the rhythm hits in there. Oh, it's so great.
And it's the soloists too.
And the soloists. Oh my goodness. Absolutely.
The way that you hear each person's personality, like you were saying before, in his arrangements. And is this one primarily Strayhorn, Billy Strayhorn, or do you know?
You know what? I actually don't know, and I'm sure that people will say, "How did you not know that?" Well, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, Billy Strayhorn, there's that cartoon drawing of Duke on the original cover of this. And in the drawing, in the background, Strayhorn is also drawn.
Oh, well, see, it makes so much sense.
Yeah, that collaboration is so mysterious. We'll probably never know.
It is.
Everything, but I'm sure there's scholarship on who really wrote this.
Who did this?
I also wonder, what was the reception to this? The reception to the idea of doing this is always so mixed. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think at least for myself, I don't really know what the reception to Ellington was, although it's certainly beloved today, that arrangement.
Yeah.
I'm glad that not that I'm scared of being a trailblazer, but I didn't have to be in this case. I'm hardly the first person to do this. I feel like maybe I do it a little bit differently than just because it's me. But yeah, like there's definitely always people who are going to have something to say on either side, and sometimes rightfully so. Sometimes people swing and miss with this kind of thing, but this Ellington one is definitely a home run.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of using his soloists that way is unique to improvised music, I think, and it's something that you all also draw on.
Right. I mean, I think that's like super key to Ellington's style just in general. I mean, what's so great about these arrangements and the Peer Gynt as well are that they just sound like Ellington pieces. They don't sound like if you had never heard Tchaikovsky before, you wouldn't say, "Oh, I wonder what that weird thing that Ellington is doing." It just sounds like another Ellington piece because it's treated in the way that he treats his band anyway, which is using the soloists both as improvisers but also as playing written lines all the time.
Sound palette.
Exactly.
They so often don't sound like they're playing written lines.
Right.
In this music and in Strayhorn's music.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't know. Honestly, sometimes I don't even know.
Wonder.
Yeah.
And I love that as a composer performer relationship.
Right. Well, I mean, that's something you do in your music all the time. I mean, I
Really
find that that's a hallmark of your music is moments that are like, wait, did he blow there or was that a written part? I mean, I feel like that's a huge part of your music.
It's definitely in the search for sure and one of the things that I love in going to hear music and in hearing people play is wondering how did they get to that? You know, and that's what I get from Mingus, from Gil Evans. That's what I get from Henry Threadgill.
Absolutely.
That's what I get from listening to Cecil Taylor ensembles.
Yeah.
It's like, how did he get them to do that? And
right.
And it's, that's the part of the process that I find really interesting.
Well, and to me, that's
horror arranger.
One of the magic parts of jazz music is just asking everyone to be, as personal as they can be, right? As individual as they can be, and yet, if you're going to write it, it's written. You got to play more or less this.
Yeah, creating something that's solid and concrete enough, but also free enough that they can do it their own way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that you're inviting them to do it their own way. In fact, insisting that they do it their own way.
Right. And actually, to be honest, that's probably why I'm a jazz musician today and not a classical musician today. Even though
I feel the same.
I still do some of both, but my heart is in jazz because I want me and the people I'm playing with to all like be on this same page of be as individual as you possibly can be. Be yourself strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a radical change of subject, but I just wanted to ask you about painting because you made this great video that goes along to one of your arrangements, and everybody can go see it at YouTube at the Greenleaf Music Channel, or I'm sure it's in other places, but type it in. It's Nessun Dorma, Mike's arrangement of Puccini, but that you did the painting yourself.
I did. And actually, I only started painting this year with coronavirus. I was home. I have 2 children, and we've been obviously home. I was homeschooling them since March. And one of the things we did every day, we were doing music every day, but we were also doing art every day. And my older daughter she's very artistic and had gotten a lot of art supplies, for gifts over the summer. I said, well, I'm going to sit down and paint with you. And so we were watching YouTube tutorials together. Nice. And I really just kind of took to it. And I'm definitely an amateur painter. But I really, I've really enjoyed, and of course, I mean, I don't have to say that it's quite obvious, the parallels between painting and composing with a jazz orchestra. I mean, the mixes of colors and how those things. I mean, it's funny when you're actually doing it. It's more of a conceptual similarity. When you're actually doing it, there's no similarity at all. Right. It's like it's like this physical thing. But yeah, I don't know. I've started writing music again. I'll admit that at the beginning of this thing, with the idea of like no gigs for a long time, it was hard for me to write anything, and so this felt like just a natural. It's funny how it didn't. It's not like I made this decision. Okay, well, I'm not feeling like writing, so I'll create with painting. You know, it wasn't quite so cut and dry. It was just like I started wanting to paint, and so I did a bunch of it, and so now I'm quite amateur, but I'm better than a beginner.
Well, it was nice to see the process of the painting take shape, all the different layers that went into it, and works really well with the music. So let's just hear a little taste of your arrangement, and I should say it features Chet Doxis on
It
saxophone.
does.
Mike Fahie.
Makes me happy to hear that again. I'm
Yeah.
very happy with that.
It came out great. I mean, Chet just really kills
He
on it.
does. He brings exactly. I mean, that arrangement is probably the one that demonstrates most what we've been talking about already today, which is that there's this existing thing, and of course, in this particular case, out of all the pieces, this is the most well known. I would say this is maybe the most famous aria ever, and I very deliberately and clearly left lots and lots of room for personal space to be made here, and Chet's just such a beautiful player and beautiful person that he really he ran with it.
He came at it with a lot of versatility, a lot of different ideas and approaches. And one of the things I love about his playing on that is that you hear so many different lineages of tenor saxophone sound.
Absolutely.
And it's him, but it's got all this stuff, richness in it. You mentioned Pavarotti as being one of your favorite performances of this aria.
Yes.
And I can't remember, it wasn't that long ago that I was watching a video that's on YouTube of Aretha Franklin singing this.
When she had to replace Pavarotti at the last minute.
Yeah, it was at an awards something.
I don't recall which show it was, but
I think
can you imagine
White
doing
House.
that? Oh,
Yeah. At the last minute, they said,
at the last minute.
sing it. And she was like, sure, no problem.
To me, it's like, did she already know this song? I don't know.
Well, I'm sure she did. Yeah.
Yeah.
She sang it, I mean, in her own style, but it was there.
It was clear. Yeah,
Good.
man, amazing.
Yeah, that's great. So I did want to play something earlier of yours from before this record, because you've done a lot of different things. And you've been close with somebody who was a really important teacher for me, John McNeil.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that you guys had actually made a record together that's called Plain Song.
Yes.
So I'll just play a little bit of that. This is is it your arrangement or is it a co-arrangement
Of which?
of Green Chimneys by
Oh,
Monk?
we played together for years and have been playing standards and sort of developing arrangements of them just on the bandstand. So that's what this is. This is a I guess a co-arrangement, but it's I mean, it is an arrangement, but it's not when you say an arrangement where you write something down. It's not like that. It's just developed over years of bandstand messing around.
Of oral
exactly. Oh, I like that. That's exactly what it is.
And it's with Ethan Iverson on piano, Joe Martin on bass, and Billy Hart on drums.
And actually, Ethan sat out on this one. That's a cool story from that session. Yeah.
Was he in protest against Monk?
He was not at all. But it was such a great
thing.
No, of course. So I'll try and make a short story. So first of all, Ethan plays a very long solo piano intro at the start of the first track on purpose to sort of set the tone for the album. And he also plays a long solo piece at the end, long, 2.5 or 3 minutes. It's long for a quintet record to have that much time of piano alone. And he said, well, wouldn't it be cool at this point? He had a few reasons. It would be cool to have a thing with no piano in the middle of the record. Also, John and I had done a lot of cordless playing, and he also said, his thing is he's such a Monk file. He loves Monk so much. He always feels a little bit funny playing Monk tunes. Mm-hmm. He feels like it's too close, and so all of those things put together made sense. And so Ethan sits out on this one.
Wow, great! Let's hear a little bit of that. Green Chimneys. Character, isn't he?
Oh, he is one of the great jazz characters that are left with us.
I got a lot. I learned so much from him. I still call him every now and then and ask him questions.
Right, because he's so amazingly perceptive as a musician. For himself, but also for other people. He can often you're playing along. I mean, and he's not. We've been playing together for over 10 years, and so it's a partnership, but still he can just say like a one little phrase and just be like, well, have you thought about this? And open up a whole new world of things for you to work on. He's very perceptive.
Also, he doesn't mince words.
Well, that's for sure.
Like, I studied. He introduced me to Carmine Caruso back in the day, and Carmine could be very gruff, and it's sort of like I learned from taking all those lessons with Carmine why John could be so gruff and caustic also. And so because we have that bond, I might ask him something and he might just tell me to just go away.
Yeah.
Shut up. And then that in itself is the thing that I needed to usually, sometimes whatever.
Yeah.
But,
I know. I know. That's what makes him such a character.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, I usually ask people, what are you working on? What's next? What's upcoming? I know this time is different. You've developed your painting and you've also developed your video skills. And
yeah, that's true too.
And all of that. And, working with you on this release for Greenleaf Music, so many different things go into getting the music out. And so, I really appreciated that about you, but I wonder if there is another project that's coming, that's brewing.
Well, it's funny because I'm again at a similar place that I was maybe before this project started. I actually have another whole jazz orchestra album in the can that I need to.
Good to know.
We're still working on the editing and stuff like that. So that's ready, and there's a couple of arrangements on that, but that's almost all originals, and there's no classical music on that. That's all more what I don't know what you call it, straight ahead, but not straight ahead. It probably sounds kind of similar. It's my voice.
Original music. It's your
original music though. But that's not what I'm working on now. That's already in the can. I kind of I'm pulled in two directions. I have. I'm still writing. I've written recently more just small group stuff, trying to, as always, trying to find ways of setting things that are going to be interesting and compelling, and yet let the players really contribute a lot individually. Mm-hmm. So just still writing music like that. And also, I've actually started sketching like a larger form piece, and I haven't decided whether it will be for the jazz orchestra or not. At first, I do think it should be. And it has to do just with my experience of quarantine and coronavirus. And it's probably going to be a little more fictional than personal. But there's a bunch of things that have happened, obviously, both individually to me and then, of course, in society with just the incredible weirdness of the world now between the political scene and Black Lives Matter, and that the environment is still here as something to be thought about and talked about and remembered, that's an issue, and all of those things and kind of how they affect me. So I might actually write a fictional character who's sort of like me. And I want it to be like a narrative. And I guess so, like I said, I originally want this to be for the jazz orchestra. I will be totally honest with you. In this time and space where there's no gigs and there's just no way to push anything, it's hard for me to imagine writing a whole, say, hour-long suite for jazz orchestra with the feeling like it might never get played. It's hard. It's hard right now to dive into something that huge. And I shouldn't be pessimistic about it. I should say one day we'll get back and the band will be playing and we'll play it. It's I just have to get over that feeling, I guess, because I could also write it for a small group that might be interesting. I've never written long form music for the small group, so maybe I do that instead. But we'll see. We're right on the cusp of starting that.
Well, the situation changes everything. All those things that you mentioned necessarily go into what we make.
Yes.
And I've been writing, and I feel like it's a part of everything that is now coming out. And a lot of the things we're doing remotely, recording and sending files back and forth. And these projects, I feel like you can't stop. But
which calls for a different kind of writing too.
Yeah, exactly. But for a jazz orchestra, that's a real daunting task.
I can't imagine doing that.
Well, at Greenleaf, music, we've ended up with 3 large ensemble recordings just in this one season.
I know, and all awesome recordings.
Anna Weber and Angela Morris, and now Manuel Valera, and yours. And, that wasn't an intentional thing. It's just there's a lot of that music happening in a very creative and interesting way. And who would have thought that none of these groups would be able to get together and be in the same space
I know.
And play gigs?
It's amazing. I think what's so awesome about these 3 albums coming out so close to each other on this same label is how that just shows, like, with this one existing orchestration, more or less, there's such an amazing range of music that can be made with it, because the 3 records don't sound anything alike. I find. I mean, they sound alike in the sense that they sound beautiful.
Good.
Good, exactly. But that's kind of where the similarities end. They're really quite distinct voices between these 3.
Wow. Yeah, well, we're really happy that you made this one. And I can't wait to hear the next one. And Mike, thanks so much for making the time to chat. I know you have so much going on. I'm going to go out with the Debussy that you arranged. And
great.
I know you made a video with your daughter that goes with this one that people can see online. That's really beautiful.
I did.
It's a great record. And yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you again soon. Come to greenleafmusic.com to subscribe and get all of the music. Thank you.